On the 9th of this month, which is about 8 days ago, President Suluhu of Tanzania began a state visit to India, which will take about 4 days. Now, in what President Suluhu is going to do in India, we want to examine what is it exactly that is in this visit for India and is in this visit for Tanzania and of course for Africa. So we are going to look at the reason why President Suluhu is visiting India and how is India going to benefit through this, because she's visiting because President or Prime Minister Modi of India has invited her. And of course, we will look at also the interest, what is the need for the country of Tanzania. On the other hand, we will weigh and see what has been the approach. Of course, right now we have the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative that is going on currently in Beijing, in China, which is being hosted by President Xi Jinping, and of course President Putin is also attending. Now we want to look at the approach that African heads of state are taking by presenting their individual interests or their individual national interests to these forums, these important forums. Like, for example, we have Prime Minister Abiy, also is part of the African heads of state who are attending this important forum that is happening in Beijing. Now, we want to examine this approach of presenting the interests of Tanzania, presenting the interests of Ethiopia, and presenting the interests of the various countries on the African continent. Is this going to be beneficial to the African people? Is it actually beneficial to the African people? Is this enough for them to extract maximum benefit from these relationships? Whether we are talking about the United States, whether you're talking about India, whether you're talking about China, whether you're talking about Turkey, and then whether you're talking about Europe, are these approaches which they are taking good enough for us to for us as Africans to extract enough benefit? And have they done so? And if they have not done so, then where do we go from here after all this? Now, when we look at India's invitation of Tanzania and Tanzania's president to India for a state visit, which is, of course, I said is going to take 4 days, we understand that there's a couple of reasons that she has been invited, because India is seeing things in a certain way. And one of those is that India as a country, currently, we see it as a country that is trying to project power on the global stage. This is coming, of course, on the back of the just ended G20 summit, where India projected that it is ready to become a superpower. And India has not hidden this, of course. We have heard this even from the Prime Minister Modi himself, how he carries himself and what he has been saying, how he has been speaking for the global south, how he has positioned India to be some people have been saying a competitor to China as a representative or a leader of the global south. We have heard also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar of India, also mentioning that India is going to be a superpower. So he said it in broad daylight. I remember when he was speaking in the United States after giving a speech at the United Nations General Assembly, which just ended recently. So India is in this to project its superpower dome as a country which is rising. And of course, India is one of the biggest economies right now. I think it's the 5th biggest economy in the world. And the Prime Minister Modi also has been having ambitions and saying that he wants India to be the 3rd biggest economy, overtaking Britain and Germany, the 3rd biggest economy by 2027. And so this industrialization then requires India to have access to certain amount of raw materials, which we will talk about when it comes to Tanzania. So for India, this is a form of projection of power. That is what we are seeing, that India wants to show that it is projecting power. Now, on the other side, also what we are seeing is that India is interested, of course, in cooperating, and we have seen that India is interested in cooperating with the global South and being the leader of the global South. But India also is looking for raw materials for its industry. And let me just have a look at what the location of India is in proximity to Tanzania. India, when it gets access to Tanzania, of course, it almost has access to East Africa in itself. And we know that historically, India has been trading with East Africa for a long time, even before the Arabs came, even before the Europeans came, the so-called Vasco da Gamas, who came from Europe. Before they traded on the Indian coast, on the East African coast, whereby they used to come with the monsoon winds. You know, before the Europeans came, the Indians were already trading with the people from East Africa. They were crossing all the way from India to East Africa. So what we are learning is that India, on top of being a rising power, an industrial power which is rising, and on top of it wanting to project power as a growing country, as an influential country, as a historical geopolitical country, it looks at Africa, especially East Africa, access to East Africa, as a continuous process of that civilizational process that went on, that trade that was shared between Africa and India. Let me pull out a little bit here to see from the map, when we talk about India, why it wants to have access to Tanzania and East Africa, basically, so that we can be able to understand very well why India is interested in Africa. Let me pull this out. Now, when we look at the map here, when we look at the map of Africa, and we examine very well to see where the location of India is. Now, this is India. If we look at India here and examine where India is, we see that it is in proximity to East Africa here, just here. As you are seeing, this is India and this is Tanzania. And of course, you have almost access from India, you almost have access to the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as you know, I mentioned that India is interested in the raw materials, is interested in raw materials as a growing economy. The economy of India is in the growth trajectory. And as I mentioned, once again, India is interested in the raw materials also of the African continent. And if you have access to Tanzania, if you have access to Tanzania, as you are seeing, this is Tanzania and this is India here. So you can see the proximity of Tanzania. And then if you are in Tanzania, you have access to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and you have access to the to Zambia, you have access to Angola, you have access to Zimbabwe. And of course, this is where majority of the lithium and cobalt is. So India, you can see that it has a huge interest in keeping up with what is happening in this particular region. So the invitation of President Suluhu is not an accident. That is not an accident in itself, if we look at it from a realistic point of view. And of course, the other thing we can think of is that, of course, Tanzania would be interested in getting, some weapons, of course, when it comes to defense. One of the things which have been mentioned in the press release that have come out in the media platforms in India and Tanzania both, they spoke about counterterrorism. We remember that there was terrorist attacks in Mozambique, and Mozambique too is not very far from Tanzania. So there is a need to beef up the security of the country of Tanzania. So I think that this is one of the things which President Suluhu or Samia Suluhu will be looking at. This pharmaceutical industry. She mentioned that she wants to see that India helps Tanzania in establishing like pharmaceutical industry, in establishing a pharmaceutical industry and hospitals whereby treatments like, for example, kidney transplants, which are a big problem in Africa. India is a superpower when it comes to this field of pharmaceutical. India is almost self-reliant, and we remember even during the COVID period that India sent some items, some vaccines. It sent some of its vaccines to Africa to help the African countries which did not have access to vaccines. So this is also very important. So when it comes to the treatment of kidney failures and kidney diseases, India is up there, and Africa has been actually exporting or carrying out medical tourism. We have been going exporting our sick people to India for them to be able to get treatment and be able to treat this particular disease, which is a problem. So Tanzania is seeing that this is an opportunity to work with India and be able to establish a pharmaceutical industry in Tanzania, at the same time build these hospitals, and of course which will be used by the region or the surrounding region of East Africa, Congo, Tanzania and Kenya, and all the other countries which do not have these particular facilities. Tanzania would be looking at also industries, of course investors from India, and this is evident in the fact that the president of Tanzania, President Suluhu, Samia, has moved with a delegation of over 20, not actually, it is more than 20, it is 80. She moved with over 80 business people from Tanzania for them to be able to explain to the investors in India and see how they can collaborate, of course, to advance industries in also in Tanzania. Also, they will be talking about mining industry. That is one of the things that will be talked about, because Tanzania has a lot of minerals, as you know. It has a lot of coal, and this, of course, India would need it. Tanzania has a lot of gold. Tanzania has a lot of gas. It also discovered a lot of gas. So these minerals are very important to a country like India, of course. And India also would provide some of the technology transfer, because India, as it has been growing, it has also been getting access to these technologies from Japan, from Europe, from the United States. You remember when the Prime Minister Modi was in the United States, that a lot of American companies, agreed to come and manufacture some of their semiconductors and aircraft engines from India. So India would be transferring some of these technologies to the African continent, and particularly to Tanzania. On the other side, if you look at what Tanzania can offer in itself, is that Tanzania is able to offer, for example, a market to Indian products. As we are seeing, if you start developing economically as India, then you need a market to sell your products. Without a market, then definitely you cannot manufacture. So Tanzania offers you access, as we have seen from the map. Tanzania offers you access to these markets in East Africa in itself. It offers you an entry point into the East African market, and of course into the Africa continental free trade area, which is being talked about a lot these days. And of course, we've spoken about the raw materials. I mean, we've spoken about the defense. We've spoken about strategic reasons. This is also for strategic reasons, and the fact that India is also, as we have been talking about the de-dollarization, India is also positioning itself in this way. And of course, this has also created a lot of worry in the other parts of the world, especially the Western world, when they are talking about de-dollarization. You see, when they are talking about de-dollarization, this issue came up, strongly. So India wants to diversify its relationship in this aspect. It would want to collaborate with these countries, especially which are willing, to do business with India in its own currency. This also saves these countries which are exporting to India from looking for the dollars so that they can pay in the Indian rupee. As you are seeing the article which came out, in July, it says that Tanzania will begin to settle, to do trade with India, Tanzania and India, to begin trade settlements in the local currencies. And in this, Minister Jaishankar said that industry leaders, they are ready to consult each other and then do business in the local currency, because India's trade with Tanzania is almost up to $6.4 billion annually. So this means that you need to be looking for foreign exchange from the United States. So India sees this as an advantage. And of course, it is an advantage also for Tanzania. If it carries out trade in Indian currency, and then they are carrying out also in Tanzanian currency. So the Minister Jaishankar, who is the Minister of Foreign Relations, as you are seeing him, mentioned that there is an issue there is an issue which has been brought up from time to time, in which the possibility of trade settlements in our own currencies, is being brought up consistently. And this is what Minister Jaishankar, said. And what I want to share with you, that Indian central banks have cleared such a possibility. So the 3 Indian banks which are here, have said that the ability to do trade settlements is possible, that it is possible. I am told a few transactions have already taken place, in Indian rupees and Tanzanian shillings. And certainly this will provide the additional mechanism to promote trade between our two countries. So this is the Minister Jaishankar, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of India. So this means that this is a very important platform whereby they can carry out trade with each other without converting their currencies into, dollars, or without looking for foreign exchange. And of course, this has also caused a lot of, fear in the Western world. If we look at the mainstream media in the Western world and what it was saying, it has caused some quite of unsettled thinking, or unsettledness. It has caused some kind of unsettledness, and the Western world is number one ally in Asia, Japan, because Nikkei Asia is a platform, is a media platform, a magazine in Asia, mentioned that why India, a new superpower, could spare, why India as a new superpower could spell trouble for the West. So this is what Japan is saying. Japan is looking at it in this way, that if India becomes a superpower, it could spell doom for the West. And of course, they give their own reasons, but India in itself also has its own aspirations as a country. It has its own goals which it wants to achieve as a country, and that is why it is taking the steps which it is taking by having this cooperation with the neighboring countries like Sri Lanka and all the others who are big trade partners to it. Even in the Middle East, I think India also agreed with Saudi Arabia to transact in the local currency. So this is very important for India, but it also benefits all the other countries which are carrying out this trade, outside the United States dollar. And of course, the Western world doesn't definitely like it. Now, while they were looking at China as the one who was carrying out the de-dollarization process, India also is carrying it out on the other side. But definitely the question now to ask here as Africans, where is Africa doing? What is Africa doing about it? What is Africa, how is Africa handling this issue? What is it doing when it regards to the issue of de-dollarization as Africans? And of course, somebody can say we have the Pan-African payment and settlement system, which is important. But then, having seen this, what is in it for India and what is in it for Tanzania, and of course, what is in it for Africa? Personally, what I think is that the relationship whether we engage with the Arabs, whether we engage with China, whether we engage with Europe, these relationships will only be beneficial if we as Africans get our act together. We will not benefit from these resources and the strategic location which we have as a continent if we do not work together as Africans. We need to continually come together and work together and negotiate together, because if we negotiate together as Africans, then we will be able to get better deals from the United States, get better deals from Europe, get better deals from Asia, get better deals from the Arabs in the Middle East. But if we go at it as we have seen Democratic Republic of Congo signing contracts with Saudi Arabia to extract minerals, because Saudi Arabia is also interested in building its own electric car industry, or having electric cars manufactured in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East, then this leaves us, on a losing side. If we see like what we are seeing Tanzania negotiating on one side by itself, then it leaves us vulnerable to manipulation. If we see Kenya negotiating and signing contracts with the United States, who's a much bigger superpower and a much bigger economy, this leaves all the other African countries vulnerable. If we see Ghana, if we see Nigeria negotiating with the European Union and signing, memorandums of understanding and agreements in particular fields of cooperation without the other African countries, then this leaves the lives of the Africans miserable. So what I would say is that we as Africans, we need to work together, we need to push together, and we need to hold the hands together, and we need to make a contribution together. And that is where I want to talk about the Africa Continental Unity Party as a vehicle which is coming to help us to fine-tune our strategy as Africans in approach, in how we are approaching the world. As you are seeing in down here, you can check down here, you can see the scroller. You can see that there is Africa Continental Unity Party. You can come and support that party. You can support all the media platforms which are working for the good of Africa, support all the Pan-African organizations, Pan-African media platforms, Connect Africa, Sister Shanice, all these platforms, support them and all the other Pan-African organizations. My name is Kwame Gonza, and I'm glad that you are watching me and sticking with me. I really appreciate you being part of this journey as we grow the channel, as we grow the African narrative, as we put out the African narrative. I want to thank you very much for being part of this journey, connecting with me. My email is in the comment section or is in the description, the comment description. You can reach out to me and then we can have a discussion and see if you want to collaborate. We can work together. I'm open to collaboration as a Pan-Africanist. I want to thank you once again for being part of the channel, and God bless you.